Welcome formally to March 2025 Tripod Care Emotional Wellbeing Hub. And the theme tonight is brain care. When I put up a video last night, I was preparing last night and I just thought, oh, I'm going to put out a video on social media, really thinking about the content and saying, please put word out because I really do feel that this particularly is one of the most engaging and perhaps one of the most insightful events that we've had so far. And the reason is because I just think it pulls together everything that we've been talking about for years. So the Tripod Care Emotional Wellbeing Hub has been running now since October 2021. And we've more or less every month had a monthly meeting in that regard. And so I feel that tonight's meeting is actually like pulling together all the different things we've talked about. And so that's what I'm really excited about. And I feel that it's also a one in which people can make a change. It's possible to really get things on and make a change from the things that you get tonight. So I'm expectant as I hope everyone else is expectant as well that tonight is going to be really worth your while. So tonight really is about optimal brain or peak brain performance. Because the reason why we are going to take care of our brains is because it's the one we've got to serve us a lifetime. You know, I listened to something really very interesting, I think a few days ago. And this presenter said that if when you pass your driving test as an 18-year-old, hypothetically, you pass your driving test, you are so excited, everybody is excited for you, and your parents decide that, oh, yes, since you've done well, you've passed your driving test, we are going to give you a gift. We are going to buy you a brand new Rolls Royce. That's good. It's fabulous. You are 18 and you are riding a Rolls Royce. However, this is the thing. You've got the brand new Rolls Royce, but that's the only car you are going to have your entire life. So basically, you've been given the Rolls Royce, but that's all you are getting for the lifetime. So that's the only car you are going to have. And the question was, how will you take care of it? It sounds very graphical and very gripping when you talk about it that way, but that's the way it is with our brains, with our bodies. Really, that's what we've got. Our brains is what we've got for the lifetime. And that's why it's important for us to know how to take care of it. And the reality is that it's also not to be taken for granted that it's also not to be taken for granted. We need to be deliberate. We need to be intentional about the way we take care of our brains because not taking care of our brains could actually could have consequences. So that's why it's really utmostly important to be mindful about how we care for our brains. Because when we don't take good care of our brains, a lot of things could go wrong. So today, I've spoken about the welcome, and the Tripod Care Emotional Wellbeing Hub is a safe, sensitive space where mental health is discussed in a way that is in bite-sized. People can get information that is relevant to their background. Particularly, we target people who are from the Black ethnic minority background, but also people who are of the Christian faith. Having said that, the information is applicable to everyone. And the reason why they have put that emphasis is because that a need was identified that's when we think about faith and we think about where faith meets culture in terms of the two groups I've just described, sometimes it becomes a challenge to talk about mental well-being or to talk about some of the things we discuss here. And so there is a specific mandate, is a specific need to address those to address the needs that those group of people present. These are the questions I'm going to challenge you to ask yourself this evening. One of them is, how can I use this new knowledge? Second one is, why should I use this new knowledge? I've given a reason already that it's important that we keep our brains intact. We take care of it now so that when we are older, it can take care of us. When should I use this new knowledge? When are you going to start taking action? And I've said that it's important that we take action quickly. Who can help me in my journey? Who is going to help me? Is it going to be my spouse? Is it going to be my children? Is it going to be my mentor, my coach? Who is that person that I'm going to hold myself accountable to? And what can hinder me in the implementation? And I must say that who can hinder me as well? Because one of the things we are going to speak about tonight is our associations. Part of the ways to take care of our brains is to manage our relationships, because there are certain people, it's just the way it is, that there are certain people that you need to manage your relationship with them in order to take care of your brain for your own sanity. And what's the next simplest step that I can take this evening to get to where I need to go? So I think I already said this. I think I said it earlier that take care of your brain. It's the only one you've got for a lifetime. So that's the theme of tonight, really. The reason it's not about today, because sometimes people say, "Oh yeah, I'm getting away with all this. I'm in my 50s and I'm still using sugar in my food. I'm still doing all the things I shouldn't be doing," and I don't feel it. That's the problem, because people don't feel it, but it's like it's adding up. It's adding up. It's the cumulative effect. Obviously, doing it once wouldn't break the bank. It's when when 1 minute leads to 1 day, and 1 day leads to 1 week, and 1 week leads to 1 year, another year, another year, another year. It's the cumulative effect of maltreating our brains, of not treating our brains well. One of the illustrations I give is this, that as for some of us, nobody would have a car that is a diesel car, and you would drive your car to the filling station and you would deliberately put petrol into a diesel car, or you deliberately put diesel into a petrol car. None of us would do it. And that's our cars. We take care of those cars. So in the same way, let's think about it in terms of the way we are taking care of our brains. So what are the things that we aim to cover today? How does the brain work? I promised in the introductory video, that we're going to talk about 6 natural medicines. Believe it or not, God has already provided in nature certain things that are good for our brains. And if we are aware of it, we can take advantage. If we are not, then they go to waste, but they're still there for our taking. The other thing, of course, is brain superfoods. The reality is that what we put into our mouth determines a large extent as to the health of our brains, and the health of our brains determines to a large extent the health of our whole system. I want to say that again. What we put into our brains, what we put into our mouth determines the health of our brain, and the health of our brain largely determines the health of our bodies, because the brain is the hardware and the software that drives. It's the computer, it's the hardcore, is the control tower that drives the body. It's the one that drives all the cells of the body, all the tissues of the body that then come together to form organs, and all the systems of the body. So basically, one of the things that we can do is to target the brain and give it good care. If we give it good care, then that can just cascade down to the body. So we're going to look at 10 care tips, and I'm going to share with you the tripart care model of taking care of the brain. I'm excited about that, because that's not something we had before. In fact, some of the team members, all of the team members, are probably seeing it for the first time, or maybe I think some people who've been on LinkedIn today would have seen it. Okay, so you are going to see that in a very short while. And the other thing is that this sleep and the brain, that's a very key point in terms of how sleep affects our brain, and then neuroplasticity. People don't, is it true that we can actually change our brains? Just the short answer, straightforward, upfront, is that we can. That by the actions we take every day, the things we do and the things that we don't do. In fact, whether we know it or not, by default, our brain is changing anyway. So we might as well be actively involved in that process and choose to lead the direction where the changes are going. But the reality is that you the reality is that whichever way one does it, that's the way to go. That's the the brain the brain is something that we can show, we can affect. So and of course at the end of the meeting I'm going to share some tools and some resources. What do we know about the brain? Your brain is about the size of your two fists. So putting your two fists together, your brain is about the size, and it's about 1.3 to 1.5 kilograms in weight, um, constituting about 2% of your total body weight. But interestingly, it's only 2% of our body weight, but it also caters for, it also consumes about 20% of the total energy that our body consumes daily. So basically, it's only 2%, but it consumes so much energy. And the point I'm trying to make there is that the brain is an energy hog. It's an organ in our body that takes in so much energy, and that's something to think about. And it's a very well orchestrated system, a very complex system of nerves. The nerves are the nerves are the nerve bodies. They are nerve cells that are in the brain, but also a number of tissues and also a number of other cells that support the nerve cells to carry out the complex function of the brain. And guess what? The messages that transmit between the different parts of the brain run at a speed of up to 300, about 300 miles miles an hour. Miles an hour. Yeah, about 300 miles an hour. That's how fast the messages between our brains. If you are doing that on the M25, the police will certainly be coming for you. Certainly, certainly. And that just shows you how well organized our brains are and how complex the brain is. And to think about that it has about 86 billion cells, neuron cells, just neuron cells. There's also about another 85 or 86 billion other forms of cells that support the work of the neurons. The point there is that the way to think about it is think about the galaxies, think about the number of stars in the Milky Way. When you think about that, that's the sort of comparison you want to make with the number of nerve cells that are inside our brain. So that's really huge. And the number of connections between them, because the way the brain works is that the brain cells are connected to each other, and that's what makes them efficient in being able to transmit messages from one end to the other. That's what makes them really effective. And so that's really how the brain works. And if you were to think about it in the graphical way, this is the sort of thing you are looking at. So that's one of the brain cells. That's one neuron. And you can see the different branches it has, which is connected to the other neurons. And think about 100 trillion of those connections. That's the type of thing, that's the picture that we have in the brain. And what tends to happen when the brain begins to suffer is that those cells begin to die and they are not replenished. And when that happens, then the function that they're engaged in as well gets into trouble. And that's why, like I said, that it is important that we take good care of our brains. Right. Okay. So let's think about the natural ways that we can take care of our brains. I said earlier that there are 6 natural medicines that have been provided just by nature to take care of the brain. And thinking about them, just looking at this slide, is our diet is water. Water is free. At least most times water is free. It's a naturally occurring thing. Our diet as well, by choosing the right things, will mean that we are supporting the health of our brains. And of course, the air we breathe in. Sunlight is one that a lot of people are not aware of the impact that it can really have, particularly since post-COVID-19 lockdown. we have become more aware of the impact of sunlight on mental well-being. There is now a very clear association between vitamin D deficiency and depressive illnesses. We yet don't know whether this is certainly a cause and effect, whether the lack of vitamin D can actually cause depression. But what we do know is that those two conditions coexist commonly a lot of times. So it's one reason to be intentional, particularly as the spring is now. We are now in spring, and progressively we are getting into the warmer months. And exercise, I usually say that exercise is the single most powerful investments that we can invest into our health and into our well-being, because it will help our heart health, it will help our brain health, it will help every part of our body, it will help our musculoskeletal system. And of course, rest is another one. Rest is another one that we need to bear in mind. So this is the tripart model. If you want to think about what's the summary of really taking care of my brain, how do I summarize that? This is what you need to do. Feeding your brain, that's going to talk about brain foods. Like I said, that there are certain superfoods that when we eat, we are helping our brains to function at par. We are helping our brains to function optimally. Water your brain, that's to do with hydration. A lot of people don't realize that hydration, just how much water we are giving to our bodies, is very important to our brain function. And then, of course, there's also working your brain. Working your brain is about exercise, really being sure that we are exercising. And all of this we are going to break down. This is just a snapshot of if you're able to do this or work on this, then you are on the way to taking good care of your brain and helping your brain to serve you for the long term. Stretching your brain is about new learning, learning new things. Really, when we think about the brain, the way it works is this: that as the brain gets older, it tends to, if we are not intentional, it tends to decrease in its function. And there are things to think about. In order to keep the brain going, there are three ways that the brain keeps itself going. One of them is by making new cells. So those neurons, those nerve cells, they can be regenerated. Previously, we didn't know that can happen. But what we do know is that as people get older, the rate at which the nerve cells regenerate slows down naturally. However, there are certain things that we can do to continue to enhance that regeneration of cells. One of the things that we can do to help cells to continue to replicate is exercise. I said there are three things that the brain does in order to rejuvenate itself, or to remain young. One of them is making new cells. The other one is the connection between those cells, making more and more connections, because the more connections the brain makes between the different cells. Remember, we are looking at 86 billion cells here and about 100 trillion connections. So the more connections that are made between the cells, the quicker and more effective they can pass their messages across. And of course, the final one is also that the speed through which the messages are passed from one place to the other. They can also help, that can also improve in terms of, there are white coverings that cover the nerve cells. And the more of those they have, the quicker they can pass message from one end to the other. And so that's for stretching your brain, new learning. Resting your brain, sleep is a superpower. We're going to come to sleep very shortly. Nourishing your brain is about spiritual activities, because now it's very clear that we now know that spiritual activities are a good thing for our mental well-being. Faith, gratitude, forgiveness, meditation, all of those things are really very good for our mental well-being. And every time I talk about meditation, I always qualify that the meditation that I do is meditation that's guided by scriptures. And of course, the final one is also pampering our brain. Pampering our brain is really about managing stress. Chronic stress is bad news. chronic stress is bad news for chronic stress is bad news a for the brain. It's really bad news because what chronic stress does is that it would um, it will wear out the brain. It causes the brain to lose cells, and it causes the brain to also age quickly. So that's why it's really important um, to be to be mindful about the way um, to be mindful about the way that stress is managed. Right. So I've been talking for a while now, so I'd like to involve you. Please just begin to type in the chat. What do you think the brain is made up of? What do you think? I know in terms of cells, we've talked about the cells, but in terms of the component, the nitty-gritty of it, do you think what are the parts that make up the brain in terms of what do you think the brain stuff itself is made up of? Those nerve cells, what do you think they are made up of? Yes, but there are no muscles in the brain. So yes, but the brain is made up of about 80% water. That's why all this emphasis. A lot of people don't know that dehydration can be the reason why you suffer from brain fog, why you suffer from memory loss, short-term memory loss, and why you suffer from poor concentration. Hydration, just being consistently hydrated, is a key part of maintaining our brains, because all those processes, all those exchange of information between the brain cells, it's actually those messages are carried by the nerve cells, and they are carried as chemicals. They are neurochemicals, they are called, that carry messages between the nerve cells, and those messages are carried in fluid. So it's very important. The brain is about 80% water and about 20% fat. So it's important that we are aware of that. Right. So let's talk about, we started with what we started with was feed your brain. So what are the things that we can use to feed our brain? We've agreed that the brain is only 2% of the total body weight, yet it consumes about 20% of the total energy that we consume every day. So what are the things we need to feed it? What are the things we need to feed it to give it that fuel that it needs to function well? And there are certain things that are called superfoods. These are foods that have nutrients, that have micronutrients, that have trace elements that also are rich in good fat, because each of those nerve cells that the brain has, each of those 86 billion cells, the wall of each of them is made up of fat, of a particular type of fat. And eating food that helps them to build that fat is one of the things that we can do to treat our brains well. The other thing to note is that it's fair to say that you actually have two brains. And I want to explain that, because there are people who will say, "Oh, I never knew I had two brains." In theory, you actually have a brain in your skull, but also there are enough nerve cells in your guts, in lining your intestine, lining your gut from top to bottom, that there are enough nerve cells over there to actually account for having another brain there. So there's what is called the brain gut axis, where there's a constant exchange of messages between the nerve cells in the tummy, in the gut, and the nerve cells in the brain. And that's another reason why we need to be careful the food we give to our brains. That's another reason why we need to be careful. And in the brain alone, in the gut alone, we have about 500 million neurons. And that's why it's referred to as the second brain. The other reason why we need to be careful about what we eat is this: that you see those nerve cells in the brain, in the gut, they also account for manufacturing or synthesizing or making some of the chemicals that are relating to mood, particularly serotonin and dopamine. Some people believe that even up to half of the dopamine in our system, which is the feel good, the type of chemical that is released in our brains when we feel accomplished, when we've achieved something. Those type of about 50% of it is manufactured in our intestine. The other one is serotonin, which is the happy chemical. It's actually up to 95% of that is also made in the tummy, so made in the gut. So it's important to bear these things in mind when we are thinking about what we are eating. And the other thing is that added sugar is bad news, because added sugar causes inflammation. And inflammation means that the gut is not able to perform its role well. Inflammation means that it's like when you throw, the way to put it is to think about throwing toilet roll in water, and it becomes soggy and it begins to break apart. That's the way inflammation is. It's not, the guts are not able to function well. And inflammation has been related to every other thing. In fact, every disease process in the body is related to inflammation. So the older you get, the more you should be conscious about really adding sugar to your food. The reality is that it doesn't really add any good or benefits in any way. So that's something too. So maybe for some of us, it's just taking sugar out of our diet. Thankfully, I won that battle, I think, about 14 years now. And I'm glad that I don't miss sugar. So food fuels our brain. And apart from water, like I said, the predominant content of our brain is fat. And it's also fat that makes up the walls of our. So what are these superfoods? The superfoods are dense, they are very heavily loaded in nutrients. They are rich in antioxidants. Now, what are antioxidants? This is the way to think about antioxidants. Every single day, as we are going about our business, as we are doing exercise, as we are exposed to sunlight, as we encounter stress, a lot of chemicals that are destructive as a result of the processes in our just normal body processes and dealing with stress are released into the body system. They are toxins. They damage the blood vessels. They damage the blood vessels. They damage every part of the body. They are not good for the cells of the body. However, what antioxidants do is that they mop up those toxins. So the more antioxidants you have in your food, in your system, the better it is to mop up those toxins. So they're like the fighters, they're like the chemical warriors of the body to try and take things out that shouldn't be there. And when our food is lacking in those things, then it means that the toxins are having a field day. And the reality is that we can't do without the toxins. They are manufactured. A lot of them are produced as a result of stress, as a result of the things that we're exposed to every single day. So the other thing that these foods do is that they support the brain. They help to enhance the ability of the brain to function in terms of memory, in terms of attention. They also help to prevent the degeneration of the cells. So they prevent the breaking down of the cells in the brain. And of course, as I said earlier, that they reduce inflammation. So, and the other point to make is that brain health is so closely linked with heart health. The health of our brain and the health of our heart are so closely linked. And this is the reason. The brain functions on oxygen. We've said 20% of the total body need is taken up by the brain. But it's the heart that pumps blood to the brain to be able to do that. So if the heart is not functioning right, if the heart is not functioning at par, then it's going to affect the function of the brain as well. That's the easier way to say it. That's really the easiest way to say it. So that's a good way to really say it. Now, let's think about what are the super body foods. So brain superfoods. I've done an A to Z sort of things to make it easy for us to remember. Avocados are good because they've got the good fat that they supply the good fat that is necessary for the membranes of the nerve cells. Blueberries are good because they have antioxidants. You know, those chemical warriors or fighters of the body, they are very plain, they're very abundant in them. And so rather than binge on sweets, for instance, that would be a good replacement, because they are interestingly, they are actually sweet. Blueberries, things like broccoli, dark chocolates. Dark chocolate, it's got to be at least 70%, at least 70% cocoa. If it's 70% cocoa, the reason why it's good is because it's also full of antioxidants, and those antioxidants can help to deal with inflammation and to deal with all the things that destroy the body. And that goes for kale, it goes for green tea. It goes for legumes like soybeans, beans, all of those, and of course nuts. I can see that Pastor Tino has already written about Pastor Tino Olajide has already written about nuts, walnuts, Brazil nuts. Nuts generally are also good, and that's because they're also good on those. They are also abundant in those type of nice fats that help our brain, and that's why they should be taken. I said I was going to share my own brain care regime. One of the things that I've been able to do in recent times is that every time I go shopping, food shopping, I buy nuts, and the nuts don't go into my kitchen, they go into the glove box of my car. And the reason is because I understand myself well. I know that on those evenings when I'm coming back from work, I've had a long day, maybe it's just been quite challenging. There's always a tendency to reach out for the wrong things. So at least when my nuts are in my car, my almond nuts, I'll reach out for those. I'll reach out for the apple rather than reach out for the biscuit, and it's working. Because the other thing is that, interestingly, when one of the things we can do to ourselves, one of the ways we can trick our bodies is to comply, is to actually make it easy for the body to take the right decisions. Um, like not buying things that we don't want to eat. Because if it's there, it's very easy. And of course, the other thing in terms of the foods, oily fishes, in terms of sardines, salmon, mackerel, all of those, because they've got strong anti-inflammatory properties. And like we said, inflammation is bad news for the brain and bad news for the body generally. Olive oil, sweet potatoes, all of those things, turmeric, and then saffron. Saffron is another one. In fact, there is now research showing that saffron, there was a study carried out, I think it was somewhere in Europe, where they found out that head to head, when they compared regular saffron spice with antidepressants for mild and moderate depression, there was no difference between the effect of antidepressant tablets and saffron. That's huge. It's really a big thing. That's so some of those things that would so really so when in Africa where I come from, they say that spices are good for your health. In fact, they say it more strongly. They say anyone who is not take any life that is not being spiced with spices is a casual life. Research is now bearing that out, that actually spices are good for our well-being. And so the other thing is that these days, sometimes it's challenging to be able to get all the nutrients we need for our proper brain function from the food that we eat. So it's also important to think about vitamin D, to think about omega capsules, to think about vitamin B supplements, iron, because all of these chemicals are involved in the chemical processes that take place in the brain and in the transaction that takes place between those two cells. So for instance, I said I was going to be sharing what I do. My vitamin D, the pack of my vitamin D is in the it's in the driver's side, the car, in my car, on the driver's side, in the door of the car. That's where my vitamin D is. And the reason is because when I enter the car in the morning, I'm about to leave the car in the evening, I will remember. And when I remember, then I take it. It's all about really giving ourselves a fighting chance, making it easy for us to do the things that are important for our brains to win and to do the things that they're really meant to do. And of course, I also said that when one is fast, sometimes some of us do fast, and that would mean that our intake, the amount of food that we are taking in, is compromised. And the implication of that is that we might not actually be getting enough of the nutrients. So that's another reason why one needs to supplement and just make sure that, yeah, saffron, yeah, that's saffron. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. So yeah, vitamin D is quite a serious one because interestingly, people don't realize that vitamin D, there's now research as well showing that there's a strong link between vitamin D deficiency, not only to depression, but also to higher risks for cancers. So it's vitamin D, and it's something that can be easily corrected. For instance, if you don't do anything else from tonight, just get your vitamin D checked. And if it's low, or in fact, for people who are in the temperate countries, the ideal is that take vitamin D anyway. Your body isn't going to take too much if it doesn't need it. So you can't go wrong with it. You must be really reckless to go wrong with vitamin D. What I'm saying is that there's no in taking that supplement, and we do know that it's good for your brain. So wrapping up this part of things, I want to ask you two things or three things to do. Three things over the next week. Become more mindful of your food choices. What are you putting into your food? What are you putting into your body? Being mindful that what you are giving is you are giving full to your brain. Are you giving it what it's needful, or are you what are you giving it? How well are you cooperating with your brain? The other thing is that which of these foods that we've talked about are you going to introduce into your diet? Which of them already exist in your diet, and which of them are you going to introduce? Um, and it's always best to aim for, don't say, well, I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, one or two things would just be good, because it does mean that you can then incrementally add and increase those things as time goes on. And the other thing to do is this can really help you. It can begin to look at the food you are eating and begin to trace them back to your energy levels, your concentration, and your mood. You see, when we start making those links, it will be easy for us to make the right decisions. When we see that energy levels tend to dwindle when we don't eat the right things, that our memory tends to become to dwindle as well, or our concentration when we don't eat the right things, we can make those links, and then it becomes less onerous to make the right decisions. And the reality, for instance, another thing another reason to think about supplements is that there's research backing that up. That, for instance, omega-3, for instance, and omega-3 and omega-6 supplements, there's now research showing that some of them also demonstrate as much equivalent results in their antidepressant effect as prescribed antidepressants. In fact, Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a leading psychiatrist, American leading actually of global acclaim, he talks about, and I think there's one of his videos that I'm going to show shortly. He talks about saffron, he talks about omega-3, and he talks about the benefits of exercise. All of them have been compared to be commensurate in mild depression to the effect of antidepressants. So that's also something very interesting. So we've said that the brain, water is the next one. We've talked about feed your brain, water your brain. 1 to 2 liters of fluids daily, really important. And what we want to do is that we want to make it easy for us to remember to drink water. For instance, I've got a glass of water here. Usually there's a bottle in my car, and usually there's a bottle on my desk at work. And then usually when I go to sleep as well, there's a glass on the table. The reason is so that when I wake up, then I can drink a glass of water. Before I go to work, I drink a glass of water. I'm already moving towards my 8. When I get to work, there's a bottle on my table. It reminds me, and I fill the bottle up. In fact, sometimes 2 bottles, so that means that can carry me through the day. It's just things to keep reminding us and to make it easy for us to choose the right things. So water, a lot of people, dehydration is not good for our brain. And interestingly, that's something that very easily affects brain function in a significant way that we're not always aware of. So that's water. Now we've done food, we've done water. So the next one is exercise. You know, Jim Quick. Jim Quick is one of the globally acclaimed brain coaches. He had traumatic brain injury himself, and he was able to recover fully to the point in which he now coaches world leaders. When I say world leaders, I mean world leaders in terms of peak performance of for their brains. And he says that as your body moves, your brain grooves. That means as your body moves, your brain is happy, your brain is feeling happy. And that's really, like I said, exercise, regular exercise is one of the single most important input interventions we can afford our bodies uh, in terms of investing for the long term. And this is my quote. It says, smoking is out of vogue. And it's true. I mean, these days, I interact with the public quite a lot. Apart from being in the clinic, I also run a few clinics where I interact with members of the public that don't necessarily have any mental condition. They're just members of the public. And these days, to be honest, very rarely do you ask people, and do you smoke? Most of them now vape. So smoking is out of vogue. But guess what? Sitting has taken its seat. Smoking is out of vogue, but sitting has taken its seat. So sitting has taken the seat of smoking. And that's the reality, that we are becoming more and more sedentary, and the impact that that's having on global health. So that brings me to exercise, single most important. And what exactly what is adequate exercise? People often ask that what's adequate exercise? Adequate exercise is 150 to 180 minutes of aerobic exercise every week. And moderate exercise is such that you become breathless when you talk. So it's like maybe brisk walking it could be aerobic, it could be dancing, it could be gym, and you don't need to go to the gym to do that. You could be dancing to music, whatever it is that works for you. It could just even be a long evening walk, but it is sufficient activity to raise your pulse rate by up to 120. Usually the normal pulse rate is about 60 to 100 in a normal adult. But the exercise that we're talking about is such that it makes you catch your breath when you're talking, and it's such that it also raises your pulse rate to 120 per minute. And 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days a week has been known to reduce the risk of heart disease by up to 19%. And let's remember that heart health is very closely linked to brain health. Also, there is another study showing that 45 minutes of brisk walking, like you are running late. You know, the way you walk when you're running late, you're not on a leisurely walk. You are really trying to, you are really pacing yourself and really walking very fast. When you do that and you do it for 45 minutes, 4 times a week, the effect on the brain has been known to equate to the effect of taking antidepressants in people who have mild or moderate depression. I'm going to get to that video shortly where Dr. Amen was talking about this. And also 800 steps per day has been known to remarkably lower the risk of premature death of 40 to 50%. So really exercise is the message for tonight, I think. So exercise, how does exercise help? You know, I talked about new cells in the brain. The hippocampus is the area of the brain that is necessary for buildings for memory. And that area of the brain, when we exercise, it stimulates that area of the brain to continue to produce cells. So it's helping our memory. Exercise also regulates our blood sugar. What has that got to do with brain health? The reality is that diabetes is bad news for the brain, because diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney problems, all of those things eventually have an impact on the brain. So that's also something to bear in mind. Then it reduces stress hormones. Exercise is known to be good to reduce stress. It releases happy endorphins, and happy endorphins are also good for the mood, and it's been known to be similar to antidepressant effects. Particularly, there's something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophin factor. It's something that is generated in the brain. you don't need to, the name is not as important, but it's the purpose of that chemical, neurotransmitter or neurochemical, is that it helps to protect the brain from damage, the brain cells from damage, but importantly, it also helps to help the brain to generate new cells. And when we exercise, that chemical is released. So we've talked about feeding the brain, we've talked about watering the brain, we've talked about working the brain. The next thing we need to talk about now is stretching the brain. Stretching the brain. Brain cells, I've said earlier about the way brain cells, the way new cells, the way the brain optimizes its function in terms of making new cells, making new connections, and also increasing the speed of the messages it carries across itself. However, new learning helps all of these processes. It helps us to generate new cells. And it's about language, musical instruments, martial arts, even AI coding. For instance, this year, one of the targets I've set myself is to really master AI. Because that's where the world is going anyway, whether we like it or not, screaming, shouting, kicking, we need to know about AI. So we might as well just buy into it. Coding and crossword puzzles, the good old crossword puzzles. In fact, currently on LinkedIn, I've now subscribed to, I don't know whether anybody on LinkedIn is here who does ZIP. So every day they give you a puzzle. Very interesting one. They give you present you a particular puzzle, and they help you to task your brain until you're able to get it right. So those are the things that really help the brain to continue to function and to continue to be at par. And the reality is that these things are backed up by research. A while back in London, they studied the brains of London black cab drivers. It's a large study, very well-known study. What they did was that a lot of people don't know that it's a very rigorous process to become a London taxi driver, London cab driver. It's a very intense process. They have to know the streets like the palm of their hands, the streets of London like the palm of their hands. And sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years to do the exam, but also it's a very expensive process. However, what they then did was that they began to put the drivers who are enrolling into that program into the scanner. They scanned their brain, and then when they qualified, they scanned their brain. Guess what? They found that there were certain areas of their brain that were associated with spatial, being able to know where you are, being able to understand where you are in a particular place. They found out that the areas of their brain were actually bigger and larger than the other people who either didn't pass the exam or normal, but people who didn't even take the process at all. So the reality is that what we do over and over again, all this crap is not a gimmick that, crossword puzzles or do Scrabbles. All of those things, if they are consistently done, they're actually of benefit. So let's come to good old sleep. So we've talked about feed your brain, water your brain, walk your brain in terms of exercise. We've talked about stretch your brain in terms of crossword puzzles and new learning, coding, AI. And now we are talking about rest your brain. Sleep is a superpower. At the end of these slides, there is a TED Talk that I've shared, TED Talk by a man called Matt Walker. Matt Walker, you could put him on YouTube when you finish today. Put him on YouTube. Sleep is a superpower by Professor Matt Walker. I think he's based in California. Listen to his. If there's one more thing you want to do today or from today, please listen to that TED Talk. 18 minutes. When I listened to him 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it changed my relationship. It changed the way I viewed sleep. And even now, when I listen to him again today, I thought, oh, wow. It felt like I didn't listen to him before, because he really lays it out the way it is. That sleep is something really that needs to be prioritized. 7 to 9 hours, and every person differs in the number of sleep that they need. Particularly for men, it's been known, and I think it's the same for women, that when we regularly sleep less than 5 hours a night, that the effect on the brain, particularly which is measured or gauged by testosterone levels, is actually 10 years of aging compared to men who sleep longer. Sleep is also necessary before and after. When we don't sleep well before and after we learn things, it affects memory, and the compromise of the memory, the amount, the deficit is up to 40%. If you listen to his TED talk, this Professor Walker actually talks about a study that he carried out himself in his lab, where he was able to determine all these things. I mean, that's one of the most profound things that I've listened to, striking information about sleep. Really very important. So what can we do in terms of, because a lot of people say, oh yes, but how about if I can't sleep? It's important to avoid caffeine. So you can take non-caffeinated or non-decaffeinated drinks, for instance. After 3 p.m., it's really important to avoid caffeinated drinks, because then the risk of being able to wind down and sleep becomes higher, becomes less. Mindful scrolling on blue light from laptops, from phones, very near bedtime. They are sending the wrong message to the brain. They are saying to the brain, it's time to be alert, when in actual sense, you want to go to sleep. Eating heavy meals at night, 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. And for those who drink, I don't, but there are people who drink. And if they do, it's best to avoid that as well, 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, because one, it can make you then, it can interrupt your sleep. It interferes with the quality of your sleep, and then you'll be waking up several times to also use the bathroom. So all of those compromises the global quality of the sleep. Ensure adequate sunlight. We've talked about that, because sunlight, our exposure to sunlight has a lot to do with melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone in our body that controls our wake sleep rhythm, and that has a lot to do with sunlight. So when we expose ourselves to sunlight, it helps to be able for the melatonin to then kick in at the right time. Checking our vitamin D levels, we've talked about that. We've talked about the exercise, and make the bedroom calm, cool, and dark and quiet. That's also very important. The way our bedrooms are is very important. Very hot bedrooms sometimes can prevent us from sleeping well. And power naps are good. There is evidence that power naps are good in the day, because they can help the brain to reboot. They can help us to increase productivity. However, it's also important to remember that they shouldn't be more than 30 minutes, because if they are, then they jeopardize your sleep at night. So let's stop sharing at this point, and I'm going to show us something on sleep by another leading name in sleep science.
I'm Colin Espy, Professor of Sleep Medicine at the University of Oxford, and here I want to share with you some of the core principles to help you improve your sleep. There are several things you can do to improve your sleep, and the first important one is to value your sleep, to take it seriously. It might sound simple, but try to make sure that you get enough sleep weekdays and weekends. This could involve going to bed earlier. It could involve actually spending less time in bed. The important thing is you figure out the right space for sleep in your life. Prioritize your sleep. That means actively choosing to sleep over something else. With everything that's happening at the moment, you're likely to see some disruption to your normal routine. It may be difficult, but maintaining a regular sleep pattern is really important. Commit to winding down and getting to bed. Personalize your sleep. Sleep is very personal, so you should spend some time understanding your personal sleep requirement. It may be recommended that we get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. However, this won't necessarily be the same for everyone. You need to work out your best sleep window. Experiment. Find out what's right for you and what fits in with your daytime and nighttime schedule. Trust your sleep. We're all designed for sleep, so trust that once you get your pattern into shape, that your sleep will work for you. But if you can't sleep, you're lying awake and you think it's about a quarter of an hour or so, that's long enough. Just get up, go and do something else for a while, go back to bed when you feel sleepy tired, and once again trust. that your sleep will come naturally. Protect your sleep. Probably the most important thing that impacts on our sleep is the racing and worrying mind. Try to wind down before you go to bed and include in that a time to jot down things that have been on your mind so they won't trouble you at night. For those of us working from home and having to use our bedrooms to do so, at the end of the day, try to remove all trace of work to revert the bedroom back to being a good sleep environment. I hope these principles help you and that you have a good sleep. And to sleep better and to support your mental well-being, search Every Mind Matters.
Right. Okay. Good. Q&A, and we can have a fair session that way. Right. Okay. So that's Professor Epson. Right. So we've talked about feed, water, work, stretch. We've talked about, now we are looking at nourishing our brains, and that's really to do with spiritual exercises. The reality is that one more faith and spirituality is faith, spirituality, and mental health is something that is becoming more and more known, and the benefits of faith, the benefits of spiritual exercises is becoming more and more known. Gratitude is a good one. There's plenty of research now growing and showing that the more grateful we choose to be, when we are starting out being grateful, and I think that great gratitude is not only to start with as a Christian, as a man who has a Christian faith and who has a relationship with God. Ultimately, my first gratitude is to God. But they are now saying that actually that not only is gratitude is a two-way traffic. It's not just about giving thanks, it's also about receiving, being appreciated, that both of them have benefits. However, this is really the huge one. That is not just about being grateful to others, but also being grateful for ourselves. And that's the one that we are not always so good at. Sometimes people practice gratitude, they're grateful to God, they're grateful, or maybe whatever they believe in, they're grateful. But when it comes to really appreciating that I'm a person who is gifted, who is talented, who has something to offer, and I celebrate that, that can be an issue. But they say that the research is showing that even being able to do that is part of the benefits of gratitude that contributes to mental well-being and that is good for the brain. Several things. Gratitude helps to wire and fire connections in the bliss area of the brain, the bliss area where we feel content, where we feel at peace, where we feel, and the more gratitude we practice, the more we are more able to do it. It's really, gratitude also helps with enhancing serotonin and dopamine. Both of them are happy chemicals. It helps in reducing stress and also dampens the area that that sort of regulates our stress, but also it's also been associated with reduced anxiety. And then we go on to meditation. People who have listened to me a number of times know that I'm hot on Philippians 4:8. That's scriptures, and that when I talk about meditation for me personally, I always say that the meditation I practice is guided by scriptures. The scriptural meditations is just rolling in my mind, thinking and holding in my thoughts and really dissecting and mulling over the promises from scriptures. And that's been known to slow down brain aging and loss. You know, those loss we talked about, the cells. The meditation is being shown to actually slow down those processes. But also the other thing that for people for other people, and I also do that, breathing exercises can also be seen as a form of meditation. Actually, all of those can reduce stress. They can lead to release of dopamine, release of serotonin, and they can lead to less preoccupation about ourselves. Less preoccupation about ourselves. They help us to sort of zone away from ourselves, and that's been known to be a good thing. And also, it's also been associated with improved sleep. Chronic stress is bad news for the brain. Chronic stress, unmitigated stress, it wears out the brain literally. just like toxic thinking wears out the brain. It literally, it's almost like it destroys those cells and just tears apart the brain. Chronic stress associated with shrinking of the brain size, loss of brain cells, um, problems with laying down memory, like as we said, the stress areas of the brain become more sensitive. Decision making becomes a challenge. I'm sure that there are people who can relate. I can relate that when I feel like I'm torn or I'm all over the place and I'm running all over the place, the little things become huge things. Um, so stress management is the pampering of the brain, and it's whatever works for you. For me, I like to engage with nature. I like to go on walks. Those are the things that I really find chilling and relaxing. When I can, I like spas. And I like short breaks as well. Driving, uh, escaping to America. Those are the type of things I like when I can. But it's whatever works for you, really. I think it's not about in intensity. I think it's about being intentional about it. And also understanding your personal stressors and what you can do about them. Because some of the things that stress us out, they are not worth it. I mean, maybe it's as people get into their middle years, there are certain things that now that I just think I'm letting it go. I'm not going to let that then take away my peace because it's just not worth it. When we think about it, in the grand scheme of things, in 5 years' time, even some of them in 3 months' time, will it really be worth it? The damage that it does to our bodies, is it really worth it? And of course, modifying our lifestyle. I think one of the greatest changes that has taken place in my life this year is the ability to say more no than yes. And that has brought a lot of leverage. It has brought a lot of mileage. It has brought a lot of peace. And I'm sure that we can all think about um, the the things that we need to change in our lives, the little changes that can then have a compounding effect. I'm rounding up now, so this is just like a summary slide, really. The only thing I want to talk about here that we haven't talked about yet, what I've tried to do is to present this same information in different ways so that it's, if one is not applicable to you, then you might find something else that is applicable. So it's all the same information, but it's just been presented in several ways and several dimensions. We've looked at the tripart care model. We are now looking at 10 ways. We've looked at the six natural ways, all to take care of our brain. So eating brain foods, we've talked about killing the ants. The ants are called automatic negative thinking. They are automatic negative thoughts. There are some of us that are more wired to think negative than others, and some of us are more wired to think positive than others. That's that's story for another day. For those who are interested in that, on the YouTube channel Trapart Care, there's something on toxic thinking. I think it's about a 15-minute video. It's worth watching that because it will help you to actually unpack that. What are the things we looked at the 5R model of dealing with automatic negative thoughts and how to not let those ruin your thinking, because toxic thinking is toxic to the brain, literally. Toxic thinking wears down the brain. And the other one I wanted to talk about was watch your company. So there's nothing like, oh, yeah, they are not affecting me, I'm not affecting them. There's no such thing. Even neuroscience tells us that is not true, that there are mirror cells that what mirror cells do is that even when you are observing people, it's almost like your brain cells, you are not engaging in the activity that they're engaging in, you are just watching them and you are empathizing with them in on that regard. Mirror cells are firing like theirs is firing. So basically, there is a deep calling to deep between the nervous systems, and you are not even aware of it just by observing people do something, even when you are not doing it yourself. So important. It says watch your company. Watch is about words. We catch the words, the actions, the thoughts, the character, and the habits. That's the watch. WATCH. We catch the words, action, thoughts, character, and habits of people that we hang around with. There is no scripture says it, but now science is saying it. We can't come away from that. It's the reality of life, and we will be deceiving ourselves if we say it doesn't happen because it's the reality. And mirror neurons are now even replicating that and telling us. Protecting our brains, particularly for our young people. I remember about 2 years ago or so, I saw this gentleman who is now in his advanced 50s, actually, in the clinic. And he had moved from from up north in the country. He had moved to where I work, and I took over his care as a result. He'd been under psychiatrist for a long, long time. And I was just getting to know him because it was the first time I was seeing him. And I was just really diving deep into his history. And so he just flippantly said, oh, he said, oh, yeah, I had a severe concussion. I had a head injury when I was 18 years old or 19 years old. And maybe it was a motorbike accident, something like that. I said, oh, wow, that's interesting. I said, has anybody ever looked into your brain? He said, no. I said, no, that cannot be true. I'm sure that he said, no, nobody's ever looked into his brain. So I said, oh yeah, that's that's the first thing I want to do. So we ordered I think it was, I don't even remember what it was, a CT scan and an MRI scan. And lo and behold, it was there. And so basically, we were giving him antipsychotics, which was important because it was helping him to keep well. But the reality is that I feel very strongly that that brain injury that he had many, many years ago was actually a significant part of the symptoms that he was presenting with. So the import of that story is let's protect our brains as much as we can. The brain is resilient, it can bounce back, but it's also fragile. And so any way we can protect our brains, particularly in our younger years, of course, as we go older as well, let's do it. And I think the other things we've talked about already. My brain regime, I think I've spoken about most of this as well. No sugar diet. I saw the comment about somebody's. I think sugar. When I talk about sugar, it's added sugar. Um, the other sweeteners are not called sugar, and fruit is not called sugar, for instance. So sugar, everybody understands that that's really added sugar in terms of sugar diet. So things like coconuts, milk, I carry nuts in my glove compartment so that at least that means that I don't rather than reach for the chocolate, the sweet the 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 sweet chocolate, the common chocolate, I'll reach for nuts. And then next up is home gym. So those are the resources in terms of the TED Talk I've talked about. Dr. Daniel Amen. If you're on Instagram, please follow him. He hasn't asked me to. I don't even know him in that way. I don't have any personal relationship with him in any way, or even a professional relationship. I'm just saying the people that I follow and the people that I find their content really helpful is one of them. So if you're on Instagram, it's worth thinking about it. The Limitless book by Jim Quick, he talks about his journey from being brain damaged to where he's now a world leading brain coach and the things that is used. Neuroscience for Leadership, oh, mine is in the study. That's the book I'm currently reading. If you are in leadership, you are in management, you are a corporate executive, Dr. Tara Swart really she manages to bring neuroscience from the lab and brings it into the boardroom. So think about neuroscience meets boardroom management. That's exactly what she's done in that book. Really great book. And the phone fix, I think I've talked about the phone fix. And if you want to, I think we've done a series on social media and mental health. I believe it's now on the YouTube channel. The phone fix is about how to get rid of any phone addiction and any problems we're having with our phones and the use of them. And only yesterday, I came across um, another piece of research that is now showing that it's not maybe, maybe not. It's not maybe, maybe not again. There's now clear evidence that the use of our phones can have a damaging effect on our mental health. It's no longer, there is now enough to it's no longer maybe not, maybe it's very clear that there is a link. And of course our YouTube channel, lots of videos there. I think there are about 80 videos there now. You can go as far back as the archives. Many of the things we've talked about, men's health, um, imposter syndrome, burnout, stress management, lots of videos on there for you to avail yourself of. And the future, so brain power, we talked about brain power today. Next on the first of May. It wouldn't be the 24th of April, because last year I remember 24th of April I was away on holiday and I was really struggling to get on the call because I had no connection. So I don't want that to repeat itself this year. So we are going to have our first April event will actually be on the 1st of May. And I'm quite excited that we are going to be doing dementia. And I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag yet, but I'm really super excited that the person who is going to be dealing with this is somebody who is eminently qualified to deal with it. And it's something and it follows nicely after talking about the brain to think about dementia. And then in June, in May, we are going to talk about faith and mental. In June, we are hosting something unique. On men's health is nothing that you've seen in tripart care before. And it's just watch this space, but really super, super, super exciting. I'm talking about it and getting excited because it's unraveling, but it's nothing like you've seen here before. Honestly, it's not. And I'm sure that both, so if you have young men, old men, middle-aged men, any men, and the people who love men, the sisters of men, the wives of men, the aunties of men, the girlfriends of men, anyone who is a man or has a relationship with a man, please don't miss that event, 26th of June. And then with July, self-confidence. So that's the list for, and then those are all the coming up events. That's all the things that tripart care does. We do bespoke corporate and charity training for mental health. So that's the QR code for the generic WhatsApp group. That's for the generic WhatsApp group. So you can just click on, you can just take a photo of that. It will take you to the WhatsApp group, and then we can accept you onto the group. That's for the generic group. This is if you think that you're a leader, you're a pastor, you are a leader of an organization, you're a CEO, you run a charity, or you're in a pastoral board, or any form of leadership, or maybe even workplace leadership. That's the group for you, because that's a different conversation we have over there. So please feel free to take photos of that. And then the book club. So if you want to join the book club, we've only had 2 sessions so far. The Body Keeps the Score, very brilliant book on trauma. It's really about delving into why understanding trauma and really understanding why some people behave the way they do, but also why we might have maybe some unaddressed trauma in our own lives and what to do with it. Really great book, and really it's a very, very intimate gathering in terms of the number of people on the book club, and that book club is eminently overseen and led by Dr. Dorcas. She's doing a great job, and a shout out to her. And then we've got our Instagram, tripart care now has Instagram page. And for some of you who are following us, you can see that we're up in our game. That there's some very beautiful content that has been coming out of there. And a shout out to our very skilled and efficient and really very talented social media volunteer, social media person, Covenant. We appreciate all that you do. Thank you for all the work that you do, and God bless you. So that's really contact details. And so please feel free to follow us on any of those contacts. LinkedIn is the place where I hang out the most these days. Not as much on Facebook. Actually, I'm very rarely on Facebook. So for those who may have left comments on Facebook and it doesn't look like I've responded on time, I'm not ignoring. It's just that I'm not there. And usually when I go there, I then binge on the comments and just try and reply to everyone. And for everyone who's been making comments and giving feedback, thank you. We don't take it for granted. Thank you very much. We all appreciate all of that. So at this point, I'm just going to stop sharing, and thank you for staying with us.